And tonight on PM Express, a conversation about Ghana's economic future. The minority today have been predicting doom for Ghana's economy, in which it says government will not be able to service its debt by February 2023 if Ghana does not seek immediate debt relief from the IMF. What does this mean for Ghana's economy? Remember, government has over the period explained that COVID-19 pandemic has had a blow on the country's economy. But the question is government spending prudently? Plus, recently, the IMF has said that Ghana's economic outlook looks promising and that even though we're borrowing more, the ability to pay those debts is there. Then again, the question is government hiding behind COVID-19 to borrow more? But even if we are borrowing, where is the money going to? Are we investing in recoverable projects to make way for payments? So tonight, a bag of questions begging for answers. What is the minority predicting? And I'll show you right now. It says there's going to be a deeper economic crisis for the country. And it says government will not be able to service its debt by February 2023 if it does not seek immediate debt relief from the IMF. And this is what they're predicting, that in 18 months, we currently have a debt to GDP ratio of 73%. Indeed, today the Bank of Ghana has released another projections which puts it at 76%, but it says in 18 months we're going to be seeing 85% of GDP debt ratio. Now, the minority in describing the economy as heading towards a disaster wants the finance minister to announce immediate measures to stem the tide, and in his mid-year budget review statement on Thursday, which many are expectant. Now, what do they want? What does the minority want? It wants government to give public sector workers an extra 2% salary increase on top of the 4% recently announced. And it says it wants a comprehensive audit of COVID-19 expenditures. The minority has been hammering on this over the years. Why do they keep on asking for this audit? Are they smelling foul play? These are things that we'll be probing tonight on PM Express. And I talked about the Bank of Ghana projections today. It puts the total public debt at $332.4 billion, which gives you 76% of the GDP. And I mean, if you break this down, you have an internal borrowing of $170.8 billion, and you have an external borrowing of $161.5 billion. That's the breakdown of the projections from the Bank of Ghana. Tonight, we're probing the minority's claim that Ghana is going to be, we're going to have the biggest crisis of our time with regards to our economy. We are probing because I have all the people it takes to get answers on these questions. So joining me in the studio tonight will be Felix Okwachi-Ofosu, who is the former Deputy Information Minister. He will also be joined by Dr. John Kuma, who is the Deputy Finance Minister and also MP for Ejiso. And thankfully, we'll be joined by Professor Eric Osei-Sibe, who is an Associate Professor of Economics and Dean of International Programs at the University of Ghana. When I come back from this break, we'll be setting the tone properly for this discussion. Stay with me.
The current administration increased Ghana's public debt to $50.8 billion. This means an increase by $22 billion within a space of 4 years. In cedi terms, this amount increased to $171.2 billion Ghana cedis. Because what this means is that this $22 billion, if you are to use the exchange rate of 5.7, at the end of December 2020, it becomes 171.2 billion Ghana cedis. In fact, he moved it from 120.3 billion to 291.6 billion. But colleagues, it's important for us to understand that this 191.6 billion excludes the Sino-Hydro loan. It also excludes the energy bond of 8 billion. You recall that recently the IMF had said that they have added the Sino-Hydro loan of about 30 billion, 30 million Ghana cedis, and the energy bond of 8 billion to our public debt. So if we are to add it to the 291 billion, then it means that within the first 4 years in office, Ghana's public debt moved to 300 billion Ghana cedis. And this will mean that within 4 years in office, they increased Ghana's public debt to 180 billion Ghana cedis. That's the quantum in which within 4 years they added. Please move on to the next. 180 billion that they added within 4 years. Colleagues, can you move on? So clearly, you will see the levels of Ghana's debt from President Kufuor to Tamils John Mahama and where they have. So you see that straight away. And let me say this. So what this means is that within a space of 4 years, in dollar terms, the MPP, the current MPP administration, increased Ghana's public debt. President Kufuor's first term, he increased Ghana's public debt in dollar terms by 50%. One government, 50%. This is President Akufo-Addo's government. Akufo-Addo's first term, he has increased Ghana's public debt in US dollar terms by 50%. In fact, if you were to look at it from the cedi perspective, then it means that President Akufo-Addo's government added 60% of today's Ghana's public debt. In fact, not today. If you use today, it will be worse. In fact, as at 31st December 2020, the public debt that we had from Kwame Nkrumah to date, since Adam, President Akufo-Addo's government alone added 60% of our public debt. And you can see the evidence. And colleagues, clearly, I have not added the Sino-Hydro loans. I have not added the energy bond that they've issued. For the purposes of this agreement, I did not add the two. So if you add these two to it, then the situation is going to be very worse. I mean, very bad.
That the minority is demanding a comprehensive audit of all COVID-related expenditure in the country, including and adding on to the 21 billion that was spent prior to the elections. On wage increases, I've been Minister for Employment, and as the Honorable Atuforsen observed, 4% wage increase when inflation is at 8%. Consistent, the policy is to increase wages. Public sector workers deserve better. And therefore, we expect in the mid-year review at least some 2% adjustment further for Ghanaian workers. Anybody who listened very well to the Honorable Atuforsen will go home understanding why this morning Nana Addo Dankwa woke up to one prayer and hope. Debt relief and debt forgiveness is his only hope to redeem and salvage this economy.
So you heard the Kersel Atto, fourth thing is the minority spokesperson on finance, and you heard the minority leader Haruna Iddrisu as well. I want to start with you, and of course, thank you, gentlemen, for joining me in the studio. And Professor Osei Sibe, thank you also for joining us via Zoom. Let me start with you, Kwachio Fuso. I hope you agree, you admit, and as you try explaining your predictions, I see you making more reference to revenue and expenditure. But of course, you also agree that COVID-19 has dealt with us and put our economy into a bad shape. And government has over the period explained that most of its borrowing has been on the back of this crisis. That aside, the IMF, which you say we should run to, recently said that we have what it takes to pay back our debt, even though our borrowing is ballooning. And the fact that today the Bank of Ghana's projections states that, I mean, it make a projection of 76%, and analysts say, going by Bank of Ghana's projections, there is no way we are getting to the 85% you project. Are you not making too wild allegations? On what basis are you making this prediction?
Well, our predictions are based on the facts, the very facts churned out by the Bank of Ghana and the Ghana Statistical Service. In fact, the facts contained in the Government of Ghana's own budget statements over the period. To begin with, we must admit that the Ghanaian economy is in shambles. At the moment, the twin problems of a huge budget deficit of 15.2% and a stagnating debt are creating severe problems for the Government of Ghana. What it simply means is that government has to borrow to finance the deficit. And in order to do that, they have to increase our public debt. Once the public debt goes up, I beg your pardon, the Government of Ghana has to use more of our revenue to service the debt, which leaves very little for it to do other investments that are needed in critical sectors of the Ghanaian economy. So this has implications for you and I. It is the reason why in the budget that was read earlier this year, they imposed a gamut of taxes so that they could raise revenue to meet the expenditure requirements in view of the shortfalls that are coming in because they have to service debt. Now, a lot has been said about the debt. We all know where it is. As we speak, after the first quarter of this year, it has emerged that our debt is 332 billion Ghana cedis. The debt to GDP ratio, I believe, is around 71%. Now, the IMF puts it as at 78% last year. The Government of Ghana puts it at 76% last year. Now, the fact has also been established based on data that this government has accumulated more debt than all other governments put together. Indeed, when they took office in 2017, our public debt stood at 120 billion. Today, it is 332 billion, which means that an additional 210 billion has been added to our public debt. And let us remember that this is a government that promised that they were going to reduce borrowing. It's on page 13 of their 2016 manifesto. So they have not kept faith with the people of Ghana as far as borrowing is concerned. Now, it is all well and good to borrow. Sometimes the quantum itself is not a problem, because they will be quick to tell you that if you go to countries like the UK, the US, they have huge debt to GDP ratios. The US, for instance, has a debt to GDP ratio of 99%. The UK has 85%. Japan has in excess of 200% and what have you. But the key issue to look at when you are analyzing debt is your ability to pay. That is what we refer to as debt sustainability. Do we have what it takes to be able to pay? You said that they are claiming that they are able to pay. But you see, you are not going to pay your debt with your GDP.
I didn't say that. It's the IMF that said.
Well, the IMF hasn't said so. Indeed, the IMF says that we are a country with high risk of debt distress. In fact, they said this in 2019, before COVID came in, and I will disprove the claim that it is COVID that has accounted for where we are. The IMF, in their DSA, Debt Sustainability Analysis, in 2019 said that we run a high risk of defaulting on our debt because of the trajectory of our public debt. Now, how do you pay your debt? You use revenue, money accruing to you. Indeed, if you check the budget statement read by Honorable Chairman Sabunsu, I believe in March this year, he says that this year, government expects to generate 72 billion Ghana cedis in revenue, total revenue. Yet, they are going to spend 35 billion of that paying interest alone. So, in other words, nearly 50% of our revenue, every revenue government gets, will be spent paying interest alone. We've not spoken about amortization, which is repaying the loan that you've taken, plus public sector wages, plus statutory payments, and all the other payments that government has to make in the course of the year. Now, our analysis shows that today, or as of the end of last year, government spent 87% of tax revenue paying for debt servicing, interest, and amortization. That means that only 13% of our tax revenue is left for anything to be done. That is the reason why government is unable to meet its commitment to contractors and suppliers. As I speak to you, only last week it emerged that we are on the verge of having food shortages because government's flagship agri program, the Planting for Food and Jobs, is on the verge of collapsing. Indeed, the agri minister pointed fingers at the finance minister as the one who has been unable to release monies to him for him to settle outstanding debts. As I speak to you, government owes fertilizer suppliers 780 million Ghana cedis. Since January 2020, government has not been able to settle its indebtedness to fertilizer suppliers, who in turn have withheld fertilizer supplies to farmers, which is leading to food shortages that the Agric Minister himself is complaining about. Again, if you look at the period and compare to what happened under the NDC, if you look at our public debts and compare it to our domestic ratio, now these are debt sustainability indices. This is what you look at if you want to see whether we can pay our debt. As I speak to you, we need 5 times of our domestic revenue to be able to pay our debts, and it is rising. If you look at our debt to our tax revenue ratio, in other words, when we collect taxes, how much of it can pay for our debt? We need 6.5 times of the money we collect in taxes to be able to pay our debt. If you look at our external debt to our export ratio, in other words, the debt is made up of 2 components, external debt and domestic debt. Now, external debt, you use exchange rates, forex, foreign currencies to pay. How do you obtain foreign currency? When you export, you generate revenue, like oil, gold, bauxite, cocoa, and what have you. Now, you have to see whether you would have sufficient forex to be able to pay for your debt without having balance of payment support from external partners. In 2013, when we did our exports, we used only 72% of that to cover our external debt. By 2016, this had gone up to 94%. By 2019, and here I'm disproving the claim that it was COVID that had created the problem. In 2019, we needed 130% of our export revenues to be able to cover our external debt. By 2020, it had gone up to 171%. This is clearly unsustainable. And indeed, these matters that I'm discussing, only today, the IMF published the Article 4 consultation report, which contains a debt sustainability analysis. And their conclusions square up with what we are saying. And I'll read it to you. If you check page 6.11, they say that the external PPG debt to GDP ratio is expected to remain above threshold. It is above threshold. The threshold is 70%. As I speak to you, they predict that by next year to go to 85%. Debt service to exports and debt service to revenues ratio exceed their thresholds under the baseline scenario throughout the forecast horizon. So this is creating severe problems for the government of Ghana. And
so it's actually the IMF that's predicting that.
Absolutely,
we'll get to
I'm sure the minister has copies of the DSA.
Okay.
So it is not like we are saying anything out of sync. The IMF confirms it, except that we have used very specific figures contained in government of Ghana's own documents and predicted that the only way out for government now is to go for debt relief under an arrangement that the IMF has installed. I'm surprised that my friend is laughing. Indeed, when he reads the budget statement presented by Honorable Chairman Sabonsu, they make the point that last year, the IMF offered what they call the DSSI, the Debt Service Suspension Initiative, which said that they could suspend the debts of countries affected by COVID, they could suspend repayments, interest payments, and amortization by a year, up to 5 years, if we signed up by 1st May 2020. They refused to sign up. Indeed, they left the door open and said they were considering it. They extended it to June 2021. It has expired. They've not signed up. So now there's a new framework under which the IMF can forgive the debts of countries that are distressed. And the conditions are stringent. In other words, if you go and access that, there are conditionalities attached. But they don't want to bear the political cost of telling the people of Ghana that they've gone to the IMF for debt relief. And so they are hanging in at a time when they are not showing any alternative means of paying these debts. It is in strict that they have not disputed the figures that we've raised. The tax revenue that they use to pay our debt is contained in their own budget statements. The portion of our domestic revenue that should cover our debt is contained in their own documents. They are unable to dispute it. Yet they are unable to tell us also how they are going to address this major challenge that is affecting their own finances and imposing severe hardships on the people of Ghana. So we have done analysis based on available data, which is corroborated by the IMF and other international financial organizations. And we expect that even as the finance minister comes up with his mid-year review of the 2021 budget on Thursday, he outlines comprehensive measures aimed at addressing the matters that we have raised.
We'll come to the demands you're making as the minister prepares to deliver the mid-year budget review. But thankfully, his deputy is here to respond to some of the issues you're raising. Of course, if you look at the figures, no two ways about it, 332.4 billion is a huge number. But of course, you explained that COVID has set in. The question then remains, how prudent has government been with its spending? And some say, are you not hiding behind COVID to spend more?
Yeah. Yes, thank you very much for the opportunity. And let me say good evening to your viewers and to my friend and brother, Felix. I think this exaggerated, gloomy picture of the Ghanaian economy is out of place. And I think the NDC is just in a hurry to create a picture as if the economy is out of control. I mean, it is far from that. Today, as we speak, Ghana economy has produced the highest level of cocoa in the history of our country. That is not a crippling economy. I mean, when you talk about cocoa and its impact on our GDP and the strength of our economy, you're talking about large base, millions of farmers who have just received premium pricing in the cocoa and also experiencing increase in volumes of production. So that should immediately tell you that this is an economy that is doing well. Okay. Of course, to have positive impact on the GDP of the country. The same IMF report that he's referring to, if he will be generous to read to you, the IMF has commended the government of Ghana for its efficient handling of the COVID situation. Okay. And in fact, they named Ghana as one of the few countries in the world, not in Africa, in the world, that have competently managed the difficult economic situation globally. So you cannot take the credit from this government that indeed, in the midst of all this difficulty, Ghana has done well. At the same time, Fitch Solution has also cited the Ghanaian economy as one of the, in fact, not one of the, is the fastest growing economy or recovering economy in the sub-Saharan Africa.
But recently you were
downgraded
to negative.
Yes, but others were downgraded worse. Okay. And that should tell you about the era that we are in. The specific issues of debt. Ghana is not the only country. We are not a country in an island. We are experiencing a global pandemic situation. In fact, in the United States of America, the government needed to create $1.9 trillion to shore up the economy. It's not only America. I mean, go to Greece, go to Japan. In fact, Japan has a debt to the GDP of 234%. Go to Italy, Spain, everywhere, globally, Germany and the rest. At this particular time of the world, where the whole world is facing COVID, no country is discussing increases in their public debt. Maybe Ghana is the only country where we want to do politics with increases in our debt in the midst of COVID, where every country is expected to create the necessary liquidity in the system for the population to be able to face the pandemic. So clearly, it is not a Ghana situation, it's a global situation. Not just that, if you check the regional average in terms of debt to GDP in Africa, in let's say West Africa, it used to be 35% just last year. Today, it has risen almost to 60%, just within 1 year. Okay. So if Ghana's debt to GDP has risen to 76%, it must be seen in the context of the global environment, that it is not only peculiar to Ghana. And remember, before COVID struck, Ghana was one of the fastest growing economy in the world. We were growing on average of 7% until COVID set in. So if in the face of all this evidence, you refuse to accept that it is COVID that has brought us into this difficulty, then I don't know, it's maybe just some points you want to score.
Address the problem of spending for me, because we all agree that COVID has set in and definitely it has brought us where we are. Yeah. But how prudently has government spent over the period?
A lot of prudence. And remember, His Excellency set his goal when COVID struck, that he does not know how to bring back human life when you lose it, but he knows how to bring back the economy. And that was a clear statement. It meant that whatever sacrifices we needed to make to hold the economy together, he was going to do it. And one of the prices we needed to pay was this huge debt that we had to carry on, not only Ghana. And I've given the examples, a global situation that we needed to efficiently manage the economy whilst preserving life. Okay. And he's been very successful with that. So it is not expenditures done out of context. And remember, under His Excellency President Akufo-Addo, he passed the Fiscal Responsibility Act, which restricted government expenditure, especially on deficit, not to exceed 5%.
Okay. And
we have been respecting these fiscal responsibility rules until COVID struck.
Okay.
So I don't see where people want to all of a sudden make claims that Ghana government has been spending irresponsibly. That the facts and the figures do not speak to that.
But just
now,
recently,
my disappointment,
your Minister of Health has been going through some probing as to how he went to purchase Sputnik V or went into a contract without going through the right process. These are some of the concerns people are raising about prudence in spending.
Yeah, these are legitimate concerns, so we can do the auditing and query why certain expenditures went in a certain way. But it does not take the fact from him that he's been the best health minister, one of the best health minister in managing COVID globally. So yes, there may be errors. But the point I want to make is that my deepest disappointment in today's program that they held was the inability of the NDC to proffer solutions and alternatives to government. Okay. Except to tell us that we should run back to IMF. Is that a solution? That is the easiest thing anybody could do. But,
okay, so first of all, do you admit, I mean, some of the issues they've raised, you admit that they exist?
Yes. For instance, the question of borrowing, yes, it's a fact. Okay. Ghana economy runs on a deficit economy. And not only Ghana, in fact, a few countries in the world will run a balanced budget in any year. Okay. So in most cases, governments run on deficit budgets. So you are definitely going to spend more than you are raising. The situation that we have currently is nothing unusual as far as management of the Ghanaian economy is concerned. And I have shown you that if you look at this 2021 budget and even the mid-year budget that is coming, which is going to respond to a lot of the issues that they have raised, I can tell you that government is committed to the fiscal sustainability issues, fiscal discipline, the consolidation that we need to do to come back to the 5% deficit that the Fiscal Responsibility Act enjoins us to.
Dr. Kuma, I'll tell you why people think there's some unusual business going on here. Okay. Because your government said it is working on a debt management strategy. True? Why hasn't that impacted on the debt level year on year?
You see, when you say you are embarking on debt management, let me give an example where government needs to go for 3 billion euro at the beginning of the year. Okay. Part of that money is used to service an existing loan that may have high interest rates on them. Okay. So if you have a zero-rated coupon loan today, you may want to use it to offset an existing loan. For instance, the NDC took an euro bond of about 14 or 15%. Okay. And we have secured a zero-rated euro bond. What you want to do in your debt management is to do reprofiling. Okay. Is to be able to settle the old debt that is high in terms of price with the least expensive ones that you have got. That does not mean that you still don't owe. You still owe. Okay. So these are things that we need to do. And Ghana government, the Ministry of Finance, has a number of programs that will address this huge deficit situation.
I'll come to that, whether we are pushing these monies into projects that will yield recoveries for, servicing our debts. But let me bring in Professor Osei Sibe. Prof, thanks for your patience. Now, the minority is predicting the country's debt to GDP ratio in 18 months to hit 85%. Right now, Felix Kwachio Fosu is telling me that it is a projection from the IMF. Thankfully, you are here because you do a lot of research into that. Is that where we are heading towards?
Well, Aisha, good evening and good evening to my brothers at the studio, Uma and Felix. Yes, well, IMF has said so that given the trajectory, we are likely to hit around 85% in terms of debt to GDP. And so that is quite true. But in the same report that IMF issued, it also made it clear that although the repayment have increased, and which really increased the heightened risk of our inability to pay, currently as it stands now, it is manageable, and the country has demonstrated enough capacity to repay the fund as it comes due. And so they really haven't said that we are not unable to pay. We have demonstrated that ability. But as it has been discussed, I think the most important thing, of course, is for all of us to come to a point that, yes, our debts to GDP is growing. We have accumulated much more debts than previous years. And so obviously something more has to be done to try to bring it to a sustainable level. But discussing the debt overhang without putting it into a proper context, you could also be missing the key issue, because you often have to explain what has resulted in this huge debt overhang that we are all trying to find solutions to. Of course, we all know over the last 5 years or so, we see how this economy has performed and how we have accumulated huge debt. The first one is the energy situation, the contingent liability situation, where expenditures on energy, which actually happened prior to 2016, were deferred to the years following. And so huge debt were carried forward to the present situation. It was good that those expenditures were incurred because we needed to bring some stability into our energy sector. That really added huge amount of debts into the debt stock. And then in the middle of 2017, 2018, we also have one of the biggest shocks to our financial system, which is, 2 billion or so to our debt stock. And just as we're about to come out of that, we were hit by the COVID. And of course, once the COVID hits, often for any economic management, the first thing will be to how do you ensure that there's social safety net to protect the people. So your focus more is on the people. You have to spend to make sure that your people are safe and they are able to go about their normal duties. The second thing for any prudent macroeconomic management will be that because the COVID really brought about large supply side rigidities and demand deficiency, you would have created large output gap, right? That your GDP and everything would have fallen. So your response would normally be to how do you resuscitate the economy? How do you revitalize the economy to bring the economy back to pre-pandemic era? And that will mean that you need to spend more. That is what we call the fiscal stimulus. You need to stimulate the economy by spending more. At that time, your emphasis will not normally be on revenue generation because the economy has fallen so low that the only way to resuscitate the economy is to spend to boost what we call aggregate demand in economics so that your GDP can begin to rise. Now, in doing so, it is very normal that because your GDP has fallen, your revenue or tax collection will definitely fall. So your revenue will be underperforming. And because you are spending more, you definitely will create a gulf. You create large expenditures above your revenue, which then increases your budget deficit. Now, the budget deficit has to be financed. How do you finance the budget deficit? You have to either borrow, either internally or externally, or go to central bank to borrow, which we often call printing of money. So obviously, you're going to add to your debt stock. And that is what has happened, in my view, over the last 3 or 5 years that we see this high debt stock. Now, so the key question is, are we at a very vulnerable level where we need to run to the IMF? I don't think so, because, this has been occasioned by the shocks, the three shocks that I've spoken about. Now, because they were the shock, you can clearly see that it's not reflecting so much in the fundamentals of the economy. And when we talk about the fundamentals of the economy, what are we talking about? We're talking about your GDP. The question is your GDP declining? No. You look at your reserve, your international reserve, and your ability to show up your currency. Is it on the decline? No. You look at your inflation. You have a skyrocketing inflation, a hyperinflation that is distorting the information content of pricing and delaying investment and others. No, we have inflation within the single digit. You look at your interest rates, and your interest rate is in decline. So the indicators now, in my view, do not support the view that we have to rush to the IMF. And I think that is why IMF said that although we have a high debt distress, we have a situation where it is manageable because the economy has demonstrated enough capacity to recover. So once you're able to recover, obviously you will be able to generate more revenue, and over time, your debt to GDP will begin to decline.
Okay.
And so, yes, there's a concern, but I don't think there's so much cause for alarm in that situation.
When I return from this break, I can see you're just preparing to respond. I'll give you the opportunity to do that. But when I return from the break, there's a bigger question about where we are pumping these monies that we are borrowing. Is it going into projects that will recover, help us fuel growth and help us recover? And then the fact about a global pandemic. And there are those who say, listen, this is something that has hit the whole world, not just Ghana. Why is Ghana's case so different? Why should this be cause for alarm that Ghana is borrowing? After all, other countries also borrow. We'll come back from the break and break into these areas. Stay with me. Welcome back to PM Express. It's already heated here. Let me go straight to you because we're running out of time.
You see, Aisha, there are a number of issues that my colleague and Professor Esibe raised, which I disagree with. You see, the comparison between Ghana and other countries makes for interesting analysis. First of all, it is wrong to compare Ghana to developed economies. It is true that countries like the US, the UK have huge debt to GDP ratios. The US has a debt to GDP ratio of 99%. The UK has 85%. But you see, the difference between you and them is that they have capacity to pay. The US has a tax to GDP ratio of 25%. The UK has 38%. So they are in a position to pay their debt, service it without falling into the deep hole that we are in. So it is a non-starter to compare with them. No. The IMF is not saying anything. Our tax to GDP ratio is like 12%, very low. That is why they struggle to pay or service our debt and meet some commitments in Ghana at the same time. But the US can do that without any difficulty, so there's no basis for comparison. However, I would like to compare us to our peers, Sub-Saharan Africa and West African countries. That is a proper comparison. You see, COVID was a pandemic, not an epidemic. It means that it affected many countries, and all these countries I'm about to mention were affected by COVID. Ghana recorded a budget deficit of 15.2%. However, Cote d'Ivoire, which is our neighbor, recorded a budget deficit of 5.9%. They also fought COVID. Gambia had 1.9%. Guinea had 3.6%. Liberia had 2.8%. Niger had 5.8%. These are the budget deficits of countries that have similar economic characteristics as ours, who were also affected by COVID. The only difference is that we had elections, and the government wanted to win elections, so they overspent. In any event, in July of 2020, they went to Parliament and said that they were going to incur a deficit of 11.4%. We warned that their expenditure pattern suggests that we will have about 15%. That's exactly what has happened. So even their own revised budget deficit targets were breached, which meant that they were not prudent in the management of the Ghanaian economy, contrary to their promise in 2016 to do so. Now, if you were to leave that, compare our debt situation to our peers. When you come to Sub-Saharan Africa, Ghana has the third largest Eurobond outstanding debt of $13.2 billion. However, if you pitch that Eurobond debt to the size of our GDP, we have the highest of 17.5%. So it exposes us to high debt distress. We are at high risk of debt distress. Again, if you come to Sub-Saharan Africa again, and you want to compare the interest rates we pay, the Sub-Saharan African average is 4%, but we pay 9%. There are countries like Ethiopia that pay just under 1% for the monies that they borrow. And all of this is because of our very bad debt profile. So the comparisons they are making actually exposes the lack of proper management of the Ghanaian economy. How is it that Cote d'Ivoire is able to manage COVID and still keep their deficit under 5%? How does Guinea, which is a poorer country than we are, manage COVID? They've not had a catastrophic outcome. People have not died in thousands or in droves in those countries. Okay. And yet, their countries have survived on very low budget deficits, contrary to ours. The difference is reckless expenditure in an economic period, in an election year. The other point that I want to make.
Let me give Dr. Kuma the chance to respond to some of the issues you've raised.
This convenient selection is the problem of the NDC. If you check the ECOWAS growth rates, he talked about Guinea. They grew by negative 2.9%. Okay? Ghana grew by positive 0.4%. He's talking about which country? Every other country, in fact, the ECOWAS average rate was negative 2.5. Ghana was one of the few countries that posted positive growth rate in 2020.
He makes a comparison of Cote d'Ivoire.
Yes. Cote d'Ivoire grew by 0.7.
Higher than us.
0.7%. So, I mean, clearly, you cannot use this argument to say that because somebody's debt to GDP, and like I told you, the average on the ECOWAS continent was just, ECOWAS region was just about 35% until it ballooned to 60% currently. Look, if the NDC believes that the problem between Ghana and other developed countries is a question of revenue, why are they directing us to the IMF? It shows their incompetence and lack of understanding of the management of the economy. You don't go to IMF to increase your revenue.
No,
but that's what you are telling us. You are saying that we cannot compare. Oh, when you were talking, I was here. Right. You are telling us that we cannot compare ourselves to America or to Britain or to Japan because they have high percentage of revenue to revenues to their expenditures. Now, if that is our challenge, and as you claim, we have just 12% of our revenue to tax revenues, the solution to that problem is not to run to IMF. The solution to that problem is what the government is doing. We are introducing a number of measures, like RACE, Revenue Assurance, Compliance, and Enforcement. We are coming out with more digitization processes. We just introduced Ghana.gov. His Excellency, the Vice President, just launched Ghana.gov, which is anticipated to increase the revenue streams of Ghana. So the number of interventions that we are doing, Ghana is looking to increase those taxpayers in our country by using the national identification card, by merging it with TIN. So we move from 2 million that pay tax currently to about 15 million.
So if you have all these in place, why, I mean, he's raising the issue of contractors and supplies, the planting for food and jobs, which is at the verge of collapse.
He doesn't know what he's talking about, you see.
You owing.
You see, the specific question of the fertilizers. I understand that there has been some overrun on commitment control. It appears that the numbers of contracts that were awarded in the fertilizers far exceeded the budget allocation in that particular year.
Who is to be blamed for that?
Well, I'm not looking to blame. I'm just trying to explain the reality of what has led to non-payment. But I can assure you that in this mid-year budget, some provision is going to be made to address the budget overrun that happened. And clearly, even in the IMF conclusion, they have stated that the ability for Ghana to repay its debt is adequate. And so the propaganda that we must run to IMF, it shows that the NDC has no solution to the Ghana problem. There is no way we are running to the IMF. And finally, whilst I'm landing, since they have thrown a challenge of 18 months, I want Ghanaians to mark the NDC's 18 months to the MPP's next 18 months.
Okay.
And let's see whether Ghana went to IMF or we were able to manage this economy better without going to the
Again,
IMF.
what have
Great.
we
So
asked
he's-
them? Good.
Okay.
What have we asked them to go to the IMF for?
Okay.
They are going for what we call the common framework for debt treatments.
Okay,
I
so-
told you that they missed the deadline to have their debt service obligations deferred by at least a year to 5 years.
For the sake
Now-
of time, he says they are not going to IMF.
again,
the
you see-
minister will be coming on Thursday.
Yes.
What exactly do you
Aisha,
want to see?
I'm telling you here that they are not going to be able to improve our tax base significantly. Our tax to GDP ratio is not going to improve significantly. They have not shown any measure. You see, what they are saying, read their budget statements from 2017. They contain these same measures. Yet our tax to GDP ratio remains at 12%.
So you don't look
Until
for
they
it.
are able to fix that, they will have no option than to avail themselves of this debt relief. Indeed, when President Akufo-Addo sat in that plush aircraft and went to Belgium, he went to beg for debt relief. So if indeed they didn't need debt relief from the IMF like they are claiming, what was the president doing in Belgium, going cap in hand to beg for debt relief?
Maybe
They were going to
just
beg
a
for debt
minute,
relief, and debt
just to
relief will
counter
come
that.
through a framework. Countries
Let-
will not forgive your debt individually. They will do so through a framework
If I
provided
should
by the
just come in.
IMF and the World Bank. So
Please.
you've already started the process, actually,
No.
give you the
to
opportunity
get debt relief, and yet you are denying that you will not go for it.
No.
Okay, so
Well,
just respond to that quickly for me,
Yes.
the Belgium issue.
Yes, the Belgium issue was a platform for all nations to discuss the COVID impact in the world.
Okay.
And it was an opportunity for Ghana to make a case
Okay.
that in these difficult times, where even rich nations were struggling, it was important to give debt relief to countries, poorer countries like Ghana and elsewhere.
But Ghana,
So-
are we a poor country? We
well,
are middle
if you want to
income.
compare yourself to London, if you want to compare yourself to certain levels of some category of nations, like the G8, then obviously you call yourself a poor person.
Okay.
But
So-
it doesn't mean that you are poor.
Okay.
You understand?
Let me-
So I'm coming before you move on. And
Okay.
all that we are saying is that we are not going into an IMF program the way the NDC ran us into an
You've thrown
IMF
that
program.
challenge, and
but
we'll
that
all be
notwithstanding,
monitoring.
if the world is magnanimous enough to offer Ghana a debt relief, why not? We will accept it.
Okay.
But we are not going to run into an IMF program the way the NDC ran us into.
Okay, Professor Sibe, just some few minutes to end the show. I just want to find out from you, as the Minister presents the mid-year budget review in Parliament on Thursday, for you, what would be the biggest thing you would expect to see in that mid-year budget review?
Well, what I would hope to see is we have to slow down on the borrowing because whether we like it or not, it's increasing and it's a concern to every one of us. So we want to see some kind of a slowdown in terms of borrowing. And even if you have to borrow, we have to look at more concessional and traditional form of borrowing that gives some kind of grants elements in the process. And then also we definitely have to find a much efficient way of increasing our domestic tax revenue collection. We need to pursue a more aggressive measures to be able to, bring in more revenue in order for us to be able to sustain the debt. So I want to see more progressive tax policy measures that really would ensure that more taxes are collected, because currently our tax to GDP is nothing to write home about. It's one of the lowest in Africa, a sub-region. So we definitely have to do more, improve on efficiency of tax collection, improve on compliance to increase the tax yield, and also be able to close the gap, the corruption within the system, and so that we'll be able to make sure we have value for money. And then also we control our expenditure. It's also very important that we have expenditure reprioritization. We target areas that will really, in the long term, benefit this economy, which are self-liquidating, productive areas of the sector, so that whilst we are borrowing.
Okay, so I think he made the point there. I'm grateful for your time, Professor Osei Sibe. He's an associate professor at the University of Ghana. Thank you so much, honorable members, for being on the show. And for you viewers, thanks for watching. Enjoy the rest of our programs.
you.